After going bankrupt, I returned with my wife and sick child to ask my parents for help. They refused. My mother said, "This house is full," and sent me away while my child was still ill. 3 months later, when they found out I had won a $25 million jackpot, they came looking for me, asking for, "This house is full." That's what my mother said the night I brought my wife and 5-year-old son back, hoping to stay after losing everything. But it didn't stop there. My older brother looked at me like I was a burden and said something I can still remember word for word. "Lend you money? With what are you going to pay me back?" That night, I had no answer for either of them. I just turned around and walked away, empty-handed, carrying nothing but a deep wound in my heart and the mess I had made. But a few months later, with $25 million in hand, I finally had the chance to respond to all of it once and for all. My name is Caleb Granger, 30 years old. A year ago, my wife, our young son, and I were living in Gainesville, a quiet mountain town in northern Georgia. The place is known for its poultry farms, endless cornfields stretching to the horizon, and winding red dirt roads I could navigate with my eyes closed. At 30, I wasn't what most people would call successful. I didn't have a fancy house, a luxury car, or designer clothes, but I had something far more valuable. A small family, a piece of land I built up with my own 2 hands, and a belief that if I worked hard enough, long enough, things would eventually be okay. I'm the second son of a working-class family with just 2 boys. My older brother, Travis, is 3 years ahead of me. Since we were kids, he was always seen as the heir of the family. Strong, sharp, the one expected to follow in our father's footsteps. Me, I was the one they called too sentimental. I loved plants and animals and spent hours buried in books about soil, fertilizer, and modern farming techniques. Stuff nobody else cared about. At 18, I chose to study agricultural science at the University of Georgia. During those college years, I took on every kind of labor job I could find, anything that would help me pay tuition without being a burden to anyone. I didn't have anyone opening doors for me, but I believed that if I learned enough and understood, someday I'd be able to do something worth being proud of. After graduating with honors, I came back home and started my first venture with a $200,000 bank loan. A number significant enough to keep me up for a week after signing the papers. I was approved for that loan because of my degree and my participation in a USDA-funded community program, which helped get my application into a priority category for local agricultural development. I also had a friend who worked as a loan officer at a small rural bank near home. He believed I was the kind of guy who walks the talk. And sometimes all it takes is one person who believes in you to get the future rolling. With the money, I set out to chase my dream. The land I bought wasn't big. Just enough space to build 3 rows of chicken coops, dig a deep well, and put up a small wooden house on the edge of a hill. Nothing fancy, but it was a start. My start. Back then, I raised those chickens like they were my firstborn. I mixed the feed by hand, tracked every temperature reading in the coupes, and noted even the most minor changes if one of them stopped eating. In the winter, I scrambled to hang up tarps. In the summer, I spread lime to prevent bird flu. During the first few months, I barely slept more than 3 hours a night, but farming doesn't always go smoothly. Some months, everything ran like a well-oiled machine: healthy birds, stable egg prices, reliable payments from partners. But it only took a long stretch of rain or a sudden market crash from an outbreak reported somewhere, and all that work could be wiped out overnight. There were months I made a decent profit, enough to pay the bank and buy a little toy for Eli, my son. And there were months I had to pawn my wedding ring to keep the lights on in the chicken coopies. After each rough patch, I reminded myself not to let the numbers make me forget why I started. I wasn't doing this to prove anything to the world. I was doing it for Leanne, my wife, for Eli, and because this little family was all I had left. Every Monday morning, I'd stand on the wooden porch and watch Leanne wrap a scarf around Eli before taking him to the clinic. Leanne, my wife, had no family, no parents, no relatives to turn to. She grew up in the foster care system down in South Georgia. I met her at a small agricultural fair in Macon. She was running a booth selling handmade honey for a local farm. I was just a rookie farmer back then. And behind her quiet smile was a kind of stillness I'd never seen in anyone else. Maybe that's why I fell for her so fast. I couldn't explain it even to myself. Not long after we started dating, we got married. It was a simple outdoor ceremony. Just a few friends and a promise that didn't need fancy words. What Leanne and I had was never a fairy tale kind of romance. It was companionship. The kind where you can sit in silence together and still feel at peace. Our son, Eli Granger, was born on a sweltering day in September. He came early, premature, and his lungs were weak. He spent nearly 3 weeks in an incubator. Later, doctors diagnosed him with chronic pneumonia and congenital asthma. He couldn't play football, couldn't run in the rain, and every winter felt like a season we had to survive. On the nights Eli had coughing fits, it was always Leanne who stayed up. I'd seen her fall asleep sitting by his bed, still holding the nebulizer tube in her hand. Many times, I'd tell her to get some rest and let me take over, but she'd shake her head, smile and say, "You've been working all day. Let me. I've got this." Through it all, we had no one but each other. No in-laws to call on, no wealthy relatives to lean on. This farm, no matter how rough it got, was the only thing keeping us together. It was the one place we could hold on to when everything else out there seemed like it could fall apart. So no matter how many setbacks we faced, no matter how many times the bank threatened foreclosure, no matter how often Eli ended up in the hospital, I held on. Not out of pride, but because I knew that if we lost this place I wouldn't just be losing land. I'd be losing the only place we've ever called home. But then once again life pushed me into a corner. It was about a year ago in March when news started spreading about a new outbreak of avian flu, H5N1. First, I didn't think much of it. Warnings like that come around every year, but this time was different. Within 2 weeks, poultry farms around the region started getting hit one by one. A farm down in southern Hall County had to destroy over 15,000 chickens in a single afternoon after a state agriculture inspection. I was scared it would be my turn sooner or later, and I was right. That morning, like always, I went to check the coopies. As I stepped into the second one, I spotted 3 hens lying still in the corner. One was trembling, mouth wide open, eyes glazed over. I knew that look. By noon, I called the USDA rep. They came out, ran tests, and 2 days later, I got the official word. The entire flock had to be called. After the inspection, more than 7,000 chickens gone. Just like that, as if they'd never existed. They didn't die from the virus. They were destroyed because of policy. Once you get a positive result, the entire flock is considered high risk and must be wiped out to protect the supply chain. That day I stood and watched as the trucks hauled the cages off the farm. I felt empty, all my income, all my investment gone in a single day. The government offered some compensation, but what USDA paid barely covered a fraction of the bird's value. Let alone feed labor or operating costs. And of course no one covered the profits I lost. In the days that followed, I didn't have time to feel sorry for myself. After the culling, there was clean up to do. Coopies to clear out, lime to spread, disinfectant to spray, quarantine barriers to tear down. The sky was gray that day, the ground slick with mud. I was trying to move an old hay compactor into the corner of the coop to speed things up when I stepped wrong. My left foot caught on a steel frame bar and then everything went white. I don't remember exactly how I fell. All I can recall is the sharp crack inside my head when my knee twisted under my weight. I screamed, but the coops were almost 100 yards from the house. And that morning, I hadn't brought my phone. After the fall, I dragged myself across the wet, slippery grass. Palms pressing into the mud, pulling my left leg behind me as pain shot through my whole body. Every foot forward sent my heart racing. Sweat pouring like I was burning up from a fever. I don't know how long it took to make it back to the porch. All I remember is the moment I reached for the door and heard the sound of a small truck turning into the driveway. It was Leanne. She had just returned from taking Eli to his doctor's appointment. When she saw me collapsed by the steps soaked in pail, she dropped the medicine bag onto the seat and rushed to lift me, not even stopping to ask what happened. Eli ran up behind her, scared out of his mind, yelling, "Daddy!" 10 minutes later. We were on the road to the regional hospital. I was barely conscious of the pain and exhaustion. The results after imaging showed a torn ACL and cartilage damage. I needed surgery and at least 3 months of rehab. The total cost surgery, hospital stay, and physical therapy was estimated at over $42,000. Thankfully, I still had my health insurance, the one I almost canceled a year ago to cut expenses. That policy covered over 75% of the bill. Lean paid the rest using a mix of credit cards and a chunk from the emergency savings fund we'd set aside for Eli. During my hospital stay, Lean never left my side. She took care of Eli, wheeled me to scans, and sat through physical therapy sessions. One night, I woke up at 3 a.m. and saw her still sitting beside me holding an ice pack to my knee. Her eyes were heavy, rimmed with dark circles, but she didn't say a word of complaint. Eli, too. He brought his box of crayons into the hospital room and sat next to my bed, drawing chickens with big grins and ladybug wings. "Don't worry, Daddy," he said in a soft but steady voice. "When you get better, we'll raise chickens again, okay?" It was moments like those that kept me from falling apart. My body hurt and the future felt like a dark fog. But as long as I had them, I still had a reason to get back up. 3 weeks after the surgery, I returned to the farm with a wooden crutch under my arm. No more roosters were crowing at dawn. No fresh feed smell. No clatter of feeding trays. Just empty coupes, and a fine layer of dust settled evenly across every wooden beam, like a silent farewell. Each day, the bills kept coming: electricity, water, Eli's medicine, physical therapy sessions, the portable nebulizer for his asthma attacks. All of it weighed on Leanne's shoulders. I tried asking the bank for another extension on the loan. Still, after 2 grace periods, they gave a final answer. Either reinvest and show proof of operational capacity within 60 days or forfeit the property. Right then I knew we were out of time. We started packing. Sold off anything we could: the generator, feed grinder, heat lamps, even the deep freezer Leanne used to store winter food. We held on to just one thing: the pickup truck. Old, low to the ground, with a broken AC that hadn't worked in 2 years, but it was the only vehicle we had left. Altogether, we managed to scrape together about $6,000, enough to pay off the credit card debt and 3 overdue medical bills. But the original $200,000 farm loan, even though I'd made regular payments in the early years, once Eli's hospital visits became frequent and the farm started bleeding money, I could only afford the interest. By the time everything fell apart, we still owed over $130,000, including late fees and penalties. We had nothing left to leverage. No wealthy relatives. No hidden savings. Just the 3 of us in a house on the verge of being taken. And a pile of debt collection letters with red stamps scattered across the old wooden table. I looked back at that chicken farm. Once a dream, a refuge. The only place I ever dared to call home. The bank officially repossessed it in the 8th week after my fall. We had nowhere to go. So we climbed into that old, weathered pickup, the same truck that had been my workhorse for years. It didn't run smoothly, but it was enough to carry us away from what used to be everything. From that point on, it would be our kitchen, our bedroom, and our lifeline as we tried to survive the summer ahead. 5 days after we left the farm, I had nowhere left to go. We'd been parking behind a local church, but people had started to notice. One morning, a staff member tapped on the truck window. His tone was polite but distant. "I know your family hasn't caused any trouble, but we can't allow overnight parking here for long." I nodded and thanked him, but inside, my mind was a tangled mess. We tried a few free campgrounds, but the heat was brutal, and Eli had started struggling to breathe. Leanne kept calm on the outside, but I could see the hope draining from her eyes. Eli didn't even ask, "Are we going home yet, Dad?" anymore. He just stayed quiet, curled up in his mother's arms when night fell. That night, I sat alone behind the steering wheel, staring into the vast dark sky, caught between shame and desperation. Over the years, I'd still sent money back every Thanksgiving. Sometimes a holiday gift basket at Christmas, not out of affection, but because I didn't want to be ungrateful. Still, I'd never called. Never once went back to the old house. I avoided it all. The awkwardness, the feeling of being a stranger in my own family. But this time was different. It wasn't about being forgiven. It wasn't about being accepted. It was about Leanne and Eli. They needed a roof, a place to breathe. And if that meant knocking on the door of a home that once broke me, I had to try. The following day, we hit the road. Gainesville to Dalton takes a little over 2 hours, but with our fading old pickup and the heat pushing past 90 degrees Fahrenheit, it took us nearly 3. We pulled up right in front of my parents' house. I gripped the door handle, took a deep breath, and rang the bell. 5 minutes later, my mother opened the door. She froze for a moment like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Caleb?" she asked, eyes quickly scanning me. Then landing on Leanne and Eli, I gave a tired smile and said, "We're having a tough time. We've got nowhere else to go." She didn't answer right away. I saw her glance back into the house, hesitating. A few seconds later, my father stepped out and then Travis appeared too, arms crossed, leaning on the doorframe like he was watching a scene from a movie. "This house is full," my mother said finally. Her voice was soft but firm. I stood there swallowing hard, trying to keep something stuck in my throat from rising. I asked, "What about my old room? The one in the back?" "It's always been empty." My father shook his head slowly, looking off toward the yard. "Travis's boy is in there now. He needs his own space." When he finished, I turned to Travis. He gave a half shrug and a cold smirk like it was just common sense. I had nothing left to lose, so I asked one more time. This time with every ounce of calm I had left. "If we can't stay, could you maybe lend us a little money, just a few hundred, so we can get by for now? I'll pay it back." Before my parents could even speak, Travis cut in, his voice lazy but full of mockery. "Lend you money? With what are you gonna pay me back?" It hit like a blade. I gave a quiet, hollow laugh, too tired to be angry. No one said another word. Travis stepped forward and gently but deliberately closed the door. He nudged our mother back inside, then turned his back like the whole conversation had never happened. I turned and strolled down the porch steps. Leanne followed silently. Eli was still asleep in her arms. When I opened the truck door, a gust of hot air hit my face. But it didn't hurt nearly as much as realizing that the house I once called home was now just an address where the three of us no longer belonged. That afternoon, after leaving my parents' house, I drove for almost an hour with no real direction. I didn't know where I was going. There's no place on a map called temporary shelter for those who've lost everything. I thought about trying a Walmart parking lot or maybe a campground near town. But every one of them had signs, "No overnight parking." The only place that hadn't kicked us out right away was the dirt lot behind Hope Baptist Church. The one where we'd stayed a few nights before. I didn't go back there because I wanted to. I went back because at the very least, Leanne could lay her head down without fear of being chased off in the middle of the night. And Eli, he'd actually slept there once for a sick child, that counted as safe. That night, Leanne didn't say a word. She quietly laid Eli down across the back seat, covered him with a thin blanket, and sat beside him in silence. I turned off the engine, cracked the windows to let the air move, and leaned my elbows on the steering wheel, feeling empty. From the back of the truck, I started hearing Eli wheezing. Leanne placed a hand on his forehead, then looked over at me. Her eyes, usually calm even in chaos, were starting to show cracks. "He's burning up," she whispered. "I think he's got a fever." I turned and looked at the back seat. Eli's cheeks were flushed, his lips dry. Every breath looked like it took effort. And there we were, parked in a patch of dirt in the middle of the night in a truck slowly running out of hope. Just as we were digging through an old box searching for fever medicine, a thermometer, and some wipes for Eli, my phone started ringing. A video call. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Marcus Gentry. I hesitated, then hit accept. Marcus's face appeared, squinting slightly under the overhead light behind him. "Caleb?" He raised an eyebrow. "I just saw the news about the outbreak in Gainesville. Was that your farm?" I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah. All gone. Lost everything. Damn." Marcus exhaled, shaking his head. "Saw the article and figured I should check in. See if you are okay." Without thinking, I turned the phone slightly. The camera sweeping across the inside of the truck. The streetlight outside cast a dull glow on the back seat where Leanne was fanning Eli with her hand, and the boy let out a soft moan. His face flushed red. Marcus squinted. "Wait. Where are you right now?" I paused, then answered slowly, "In the truck behind a church. Just for now." "Your son, is he all right?" Marcus leaned forward, trying to get a better look. "No," I said quietly. He's got a fever. We're trying to bring it down. If it gets worse, I'll take him to the ER. Marcus didn't respond right away. For 2 seconds, his face went from stunned to serious, then firm. "Send me your location," he said. "I'm coming to you right now." 30 minutes later, the headlights of an SUV swept across the empty lot, cutting straight through our windshield. I sat up in the driver's seat. Before I could even open the door, Marcus was already out of his vehicle, slamming the door shut and striding toward me with a look I hadn't seen on his face since our college days. He didn't say a word, just shot me a glance, then moved straight to the back of the truck and opened the rear door. Leanne looked up. She didn't speak either, but the shimmer in her eyes told Marcus everything he needed to know. This was serious. "Get in," he said. His voice was blunt but firm. "We're taking the boy to the hospital. Everything else can wait." I nodded, lifting Eli gently from Leanne's arms. His body was burning hot. His little hands weakly clinging to my neck. Leanne gripped my wrist tight for a second, then let go. "Go," she whispered. "I'll follow behind in our truck." We sped off into the night down long, quiet back roads where even the street lights looked like they were asleep. Marcus didn't ask anything else. He knew I didn't have the energy to answer. Every so often, I caught his eyes in the rear view mirror locked onto the road, steady and storming. It wasn't me he was angry at. It was the whole damn situation. At the county hospital, I carried Eli into the emergency room. Marcus walked straight to the front desk, pulled out his credit card, and handed it over without saying a word. When the nurse asked relationship to the patient, he replied, "Friend, just don't make the kid wait." While we waited for results, I sank onto a bench, my whole body aching from my shoulders to my spine. Marcus handed me a bottle of water and a sandwich from the vending machine. I looked at him, silent. He didn't expect me to say anything. By morning, Eli's fever had gone down. The doctor said there were no serious complications. They just needed a few days of monitoring in a cool, clean place to rest. I stood by the hospital window watching the morning light filter through the glass. Still not sure how we'd made it through the night. Marcus leaned against the wall and said, "I've got a place. My cousin raises goats out in Rome, Georgia. He's older now and barely uses the house. He's got 3 bedrooms. One of them's empty. I already called. You, your wife, and the boy can stay there." I turned to look at him, my throat tightening. "Free." Marcus added, "No strings. No end date. If you can get back on your feet, great. If not, stay. I'm not letting you go through this alone."